nervous. I mean, I've been to the parking lot, but I've never actually been inside.
You'll be okay. First stop, Starbucks.
Where do I find the protractors?
Aisle F60, halfway down on your left, there's 3 colors. I have big dreams for the schoolroom. $40, not that big.
We got graph rule. We got college rule. We got wide rule.
The only rule I knew in college was
home ec supplies. Won't need, won't need, won't need, won't need, won't need, don't want. Only school supply I need.
You know what they call this? A learning curve.
And here's where I store all my qualifications to teach. So here we have fishing 101, and then the advanced, we have fishing 201.
What about 301?
Second semester.
I'm just taking the whole cart. 4K. That's 4,000. I can teach math.
This is a class we're gonna call Dealing with Disappointment.
Chip, you're a good dad. What are you doing for school this year?
I'm tired already. In all seriousness, we know that back to school this year might look different for kids, for parents, and for teachers. And we can all use a laugh as a reminder that we're in this together.
If you want to know how you can help support families in our area, New Life is hosting a back to school drive.
And you can find out all the information on newlife.tv/back to school.
Hi, I'm Josh.
And I'm Hallie.
And we're super glad that you're here today with us. As a matter of fact, we've been a part of New Life now for about 3 years.
Yeah, we have had the privilege to be part of the team on Bainbridge.
That's right. This morning is meant to be an interactive experience for you, which means that if you have any questions, you just want to say hi or good morning, our online host would love to connect with you in the comment section.
And if you have any prayer requests at all, then please put that in the comments. Or if you're watching from the /watch platform, then there's a prayer request button and one of our team members will connect with you that way.
Absolutely. You know, in just a few moments, we're going to enter into a time of just meaningful worship and really hear a hope-filled message about Jesus Christ.
And if you have kids at home, then hang on because we've got a great kids program at the very end. Our kids love to watch it.
That's right. Hey, wherever you find yourself today, whether you want to join in song or you want to take some notes found on our app, this is an opportunity this morning for you to connect with God and for Him to connect with you.
There were walls between us. By the cross you came and love awakens us. I feel, I'm woke, yeah, I'm woke. Let's just groove a little more. At the age of 12, I decided to follow Jesus. It was a surreal moment for me. But looking back on that time now, in my 12-year-old mind, I thought I had to sit at the altar and scream Jesus a million times. And the longer I stayed at the altar and cried out and prayed, that's the deeper it was. And it's like, no, when you decide to follow Jesus, you just need to have a made-up mind. Choose to turn away from sin and turn away from the world and fix your eyes on him. And for those who haven't made the decision yet, I want to tell you this. Christianity is not a thing that you have to live up to, a standard. You live into it because some progress is better than none. So make the decision today to follow Jesus and don't turn back.
Decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. I have decided blessed Savior, I surrender all. I surrender all. I surrender all to thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all. I surrender. I surrender all. I surrender all.
Look at our problems in the world today. I mean, there's so many of them. And they seem to be multiplying and complex and unsolvable, but what's beneath all of them? And what if what's beneath them is something that nobody's talking about? Like, I'm not talking about it, you're not talking about it. We just don't, and it's our world's biggest problem, and it's sin. Now, when we think about sin, is it just like the worst thing I've ever done or the worst thing that anyone's ever done to me? And if everyone thought like me, talked like me, saw the world the way that I did, then our world would be a better place. But what if that's even part of the power of sin? It's about me. The Bible defines sin as missing the mark, both in the Hebrew and Greek mindset. It's an archery term. So I want to ask you, what's the mark? What are you missing? And what if the mark is God's glory? So I ask you, what are you aiming your life at? Because when we talk about sin, we have to talk about glory. And when we talk about glory, we have to talk about God. And God doesn't want any of us to miss out on what life is really about.
My brother is 12 years older than me, so I pretty much grew up like an only child. Because of that, I didn't learn how to share very well, because when you're a first grader and your brother is a freshman in college, you really don't have all that much in common, so you don't learn to share. So when I was dating my wife and we'd go to dinner and she would say, "Hey, would you like to share a meal for dinner tonight?" I would simply reply, "No." And when I really realized that that was not the appropriate or correct response, I would try and backpedal and then say something like, "Well, how about we do this? How about I order a burger and fries, you order a side of fries, and then together we can order another burger and then have dinner together," because change is really hard. Change is difficult. And I've had this question rolling around in my mind, and maybe you do too. And it's this question that says, is change possible? I mean, you can look around our country and around the world right now, and you can see an election season and how it divides us greatly. You can see racial inequality and see violence and all of the riots taking place. You can see hurricanes and all the devastation and all the loss. We can see our educational system and all of the challenges that are there, and the lack of clarity and not knowing what to do. And then you can see a global pandemic with all of its fear, its conspiracy theories, and all along the grief from sickness and the dying. And we can look at all of these things, and the question that can roll into our hearts and to our minds: is change possible? For the last 6 weeks, we've been talking about sin and glory. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to a church in the city of Rome, talking about the world's greatest problem. And he takes the whole first half of the letter to talk about the problem of sin. And then chapter 12, he flips a switch. He shifts gears. He begins to pivot. How do I know that? Because the first two words in chapter 12, he says, "and so." Some Bible translations say, "therefore." Paul is basically saying, based upon what I've stated or the argument that I've been building in the first half of my letter and the first 11 chapters of the book of Romans, now we can respond in this way: and so, because glory is the target of our lives. And so, dear brothers and sisters, because sin has wedged itself into humanity and has its control over humanity, and so, dear brothers and sisters, because sin causes us to miss the mark, and then we clothe ourselves in guilt and shame. And so, dear brothers and sisters, because of that guilt and shame, we are separated from God. And so, dear brothers and sisters, and because we are separated from our God and our Creator, God sent Jesus to reconcile sin once and for all through his death on the cross, his burial, and his resurrection from the grave. Paul says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all that he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind that he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Paul is telling the church in Rome there was this old way of doing things, and it required a sacrifice of death. And he's saying because of what Jesus has done, there is a new way of doing things now, and it requires a different kind of sacrifice, a sacrifice of life. He's telling them that life is your own, and this is now the way we worship God, how we truly worship God, no longer needing an animal sacrifice of death. Jesus came and did the final death sacrifice so that you and I could be a living sacrifice, a sacrifice of life. And when we begin to do that, we begin to shift from sin's control over our lives, and we begin to step into glory. Paul goes on to say, don't copy the behaviors and the customs of this world, but be transformed. Let God transform you by changing the way that you think. No longer trying to live under this sin reconciliation system. Instead, step into glory, the life that you were always intended to live. Paul is looking at us today and saying, step into glory. No longer need to be in this ritual, this cycle of sin management, but stepping in and sharing in the glory of Jesus. You know, when I hear the words of Paul, it actually reminds me of coaching high school football here in my local community. This season will be my 10th year coaching high school football here in my local community. I could still remember the first year coaching when I showed up on the field. I began to realize something was wrong. There was a problem. And it wasn't just because the season before our team had only won one game. It was because there was a lack of unity in the team. There was selfishness that was rampant. And it looked like that some significant change needed to happen. As you looked around the team, you began to see that players were only looking out for their own interests. They were tearing one another down instead of building each other up, and there was a failure to commit to the small details that make programs successful and that turn things around. Change was an absolute necessity. A few things needed to happen in order for us to see that take place. The first thing is that first year I started coaching, we got a new head coach. And the change had to start with us, the coaching staff. Then there had to be a different paradigm, a different way of thinking that had to take place. We had to rethink everything. Then players had to begin to believe in one another and begin to celebrate each other. And finally, we had to commit to the small details that bring success to the program. That's what makes you a family. I mean, I'll be honest, it took about 3 years for us to see any significant change to happen. Some of what needed to take place was we had to have some players graduate out of the program and families move on and some coaches move on. But the major work that took place was when players began to make that commitment to change. They began to not just play for themselves, but they began to play for the team first. Instead of tearing one another down, they began to build each other up. They committed to the small details that change things. Things like getting it done in the classroom, showing up to the weight room before you ever step foot on the football field. It's those small things that make huge, huge impacts to a football program. Now, change is difficult. I'll admit that. But change is possible. Over the past 10 years, our players and coaches have committed to this new way of thinking, have committed to one another, have said unity is vitally important. The team is first, and we've committed to the small details that bring success to a program. And because we've made that commitment, we've become one of the more successful programs here in our area. So whether we're talking high school football, Paul's letter to the Romans, or the chaos in our current world, we need to hear today that change is possible. Paul is telling the church in Rome that change is possible. How do we know that? Because he's telling them about a new way to live. If change wasn't possible, why would he talk about this new life, this new glory to step into? He is telling us, and he is telling the church, change is possible. But it's hard because when you're trying to manage sin and continually follow this cycle of reconciliation and continually trying to reconcile sin's grip on humanity, it starts to actually feel like, I don't know if change is possible at all. All we're doing is managing sin. But when we begin to live into this new way, this new life, become these living sacrifices, worship becomes more effortless. All of a sudden, when we focus on what Jesus has already done on the cross, through his burial, through his resurrection, it's like praise and thanksgiving bursts forth from our lives, from our hearts, and we begin to resonate together. Change is possible. That's why it's so powerful when we gather together and we hear one another sing, because it reminds us of what Jesus has done and it declares that change is possible. Now let us all step into this new glory that God has designed for us all. It's interesting, one year I had some freshman football players come up to me as a coach and they said, "Coach, you know what they're saying about us?" And I said, "Who's saying what about who?" He said, "What the older players are saying about this freshman class. They're saying that we're going to be the class that ruins our winning tradition." I'd come to find out that these kids had struggled a little bit in middle school and weren't that successful. And immediately, I knew what my objective and goal was as a coach for that season. It was to change these kids' perspective and their mindset and began to get them thinking in a different way. So I snapped my head around, I looked at these boys, and I said, "Gentlemen, today's a new day. The past is gone. I don't care what you did in high school, what you did in middle school, but you're in high school now. Welcome to our program." And you know what we do? And as they looked back at me with these blank stares, I simply said to them, "We win." And it was to change their mindset, their mind frame, to turn the paradigm around, to begin to believe that change is possible. Paul shows us in Romans 12 that change is also personal. Change is personal, that there is this personal commitment that we all must make. That's why he says, don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. This is a passive imperative that Paul is using here, which says something outside of you, some external force is doing the changing. One person said it this way: don't allow the world to squeeze you into its mold. The message says don't get so comfortable with this way of thinking that you just go blindly into what the world is telling you how to live. There is this external force that Paul is saying, let God transform you. Let the change happen. Allow God to renew your mind. Make a commitment to this new way of thinking and begin to step into glory. You see, when we make this commitment together, this personal commitment, it changes the way we live. All of a sudden, our Sunday through Saturday, it's completely different. We're no longer managing sin. We're stepping into glory, living into this new life. It changes the way we give. Now we see our lives as this blessing that overflows to the world around us. And it changes the way we worship, overflowing with thanksgiving and praise. But it's this personal commitment that we make together to say, I'm going to commit to be a part of change. I now believe it is possible. Now I'm going to make it personal. I knew things started to change in our football program is when I began to see our team captains pulling other teammates aside without coaches telling them to do it, without coaches having to take the initiative. Team captains pulled players aside and began to hold each other accountable. It's like they were saying, hey, if I'm going to buy in this much, you're going to buy in this much. And they began to take personal responsibility for the new paradigm and the new way of doing things in our program. The same is for us. When we begin to believe that change is possible, then we make it personal. And we begin to look at one another and say, let's go there together. And that's Paul's next point, that change is communal. Change just doesn't happen just to individuals. It happens to a group of individuals together. That's the beauty of a team, right? It's a bunch of individuals thinking team over self first to see a change take place, to see transformation happen in our lives. This is why Paul says, because of the privilege and authority God has given me, I give each of you this warning. Listen to this. Don't think you are better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves, measuring yourselves by the faith God has given us. And just as our bodies have many parts and each part has a special function, so it is with Christ's body. We are many parts of one body and we all belong to each other. In His grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. So if God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak out with as much faith as God has given you. If your gift is serving others, serve them well. If you are a teacher, teach well. If your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. If it is giving, give generously. If God has given you leadership ability, take the responsibility seriously. And if you have a gift for showing kindness to others, do it gladly. Paul is making the case that when we function outside of the body, we act selfishly. But when we function as a body, celebrating all of the gifts, all of everyone's roles together, all of a sudden we begin to live into the glory of Jesus. We share in His glory together, functioning as one body. Yes, many parts, different gifts, different roles, but we function as a community, as a family. Don't think you're better than you really are. Look around you and realize, I need everybody here. I need everyone for us to be able to move forward and see transformation, to see the gospel move forward together. You know, as a football coach, every play is designed this way. It takes all of us working together. I actually have a play here on the board, and this is simply our 48 sweep. Our 48 sweep. And everyone on the team has a role and a function in this play. The first thing is our guards pull. They know that my job in this play is to pull. Tackles block down, tight ends block down, two backs block down, tackles go get a linebacker. This running back fakes up the middle to draw the linebacker's attention. Wide receiver gets a cornerback, and this fullback is getting the ball, following his blockers on the outside. When I first saw this play practice my first year, this kid right here didn't do his role, and he came out to the outside and he just laid the perfect block, laying a kid on his back, and most of the team celebrated and went, oh, and I was like, oh. You know who wasn't saying oh? The seasoned coaches who realized that that kid didn't do his job, and he went up and he looked at that running back and he said, look behind you. Look at your running back who's supposed to have the ball right now. Where is he? And he was 5 yards in the backfield, tackled for a loss, because this kid decided not to do his job and did somebody else's role, and it messed the whole thing up. And when we do all of our jobs together, it all works in harmony, in unison, to do incredible, amazing things. Change is communal. And finally, we begin to see that change is practical. You know, you can start to believe a certain way and start to think a certain way, but at some point, you got to get to work, right? You got to get the job done. Change is practical. There is this commitment And then there is these steps that we walk into and we start to say, we have got to move the ball forward. We have got to change the needle. And as the body of Christ, there are practical things that we need to do and continue to live into that bring the real change. If you want to know how to practice living into this glory, look at verses 9 through 21. Honestly, as a father, these are what I want my kids to read every week of their life and to live out. And I think if they do, when they become adults, they will have looked back and realized they will have lived into glory. Here are a few things that Paul says. They're beautiful. Listen to it. Don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Love each other with genuine affection. Never be lazy. Work hard. Be ready to help people in need. Practice hospitality eagerly. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. Live at peace with everyone. And I could try and live that out every week the rest of my life, and then I believe I'll look back in my life and go, I got a taste of glory. I call it practicing the glory. I encourage you this week, go back and read Romans 12, especially 9 through 21. If you want to know what living into glory looks like, just start to live these out day by day, week by week. Glory is not a concept, it's not a philosophy. It's something we step into, and it's something that we live out. This week, go back to Romans 12. I encourage all of us to read it together and realize Paul is calling out to the church. He's saying that change is possible. We have a new king. He's changed everything. There is a new way to live. There's a new mindset, a new way of thinking. Allow God to change you, to transform you. Celebrate one another. You're in the community of God, the body of Christ. That is something to be grasped, held onto, and to be celebrated. And finally, do the little things that will transform us. Propel the gospel forward, declaring that Jesus has changed everything. He's the hero of our stories because of what he's done on the cross, his death, his burial, his resurrection. We no longer have to manage sin and continually do the cycle of missing the mark, but we can live into and share in the glory of Jesus. That's the hope of glory. No longer stuck in the old, but living into the new. Would you pray with me today? Jesus, I just pray right now, I thank you for these beautiful people who are watching right now, seeing what's going around in our world and going on in our country, and wondering, is change even possible? And today I pray you would give us hope. Today I pray that that hope would swell within our hearts and we would begin to believe that because of what Jesus has done on the cross and because he rose from the dead, change is possible. Today we make a personal commitment to the change that you offer us, to the glory that you extend to all of us. And I pray right now for those who might be saying yes to that glory for the very first time, when they would say yes to you, Jesus, we pray that they would take those first beautiful steps into glory. Then God, teach us well to celebrate each other and to lift up each other's gifts, to build each other up rather than tearing each other down, and committing to the practical small details of this faith journey that you call us into so that we can experience your glory together. Jesus, we thank you for changing the game. We thank you that there is hope for the future, and we thank you for making it possible that we can change and see transformation happen in our world today. We love you, Jesus. Pray these things in your name. Amen.
Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still, every wave. At your name, and Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble, Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear, Jesus. call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. And your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. And your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. And your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. And Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
After a message like today with practical next steps, it makes me think two questions. What is Jesus saying to me, and what am I doing about it? I hope that you're asking those same questions and that you have practical next steps out of today's message. I hope you'll have a conversation with someone near to you right now or someone in your life of what God's calling you to do next. Maybe your next step is getting connected. No one does the mission alone, and it's so difficult to find connection in this season. The way that we do it at New Life is through the connection card. You can fill that out right now. Maybe you need prayer. There's a place to do that as well. We want you to know whatever you're going through, somebody is praying for you. Another way that connects us to the mission is through giving. Your giving is making a difference. And I know for my life, I'm more connected to those things that I'm investing into. And when we give, when we live generous lives, we're not just giving to New Life, we're giving to make a difference in our communities and to make the kingdom of God go forward. I got to see it firsthand this last week. A new friend of mine named Malcolm got baptized at one of our in-person gatherings. That happens because of the generosity of New Lifers. And those stories are happening all over our region and all over the world. And you can give right now at newlife.tv/give. Maybe it's gonna be an extra gift of generosity this month. Maybe your normal giving, but you can give right now online. Thank you for your generosity. It's making a difference. It's been so good to be together today. Can't wait to see you next week. Have a great week on the mission with Jesus.
Hey guys, it's Ellie from the Underground Olympics. I'm so glad that all of you guys are here, and I cannot wait to hear the amazing message today. See you soon!
The Bible. It's 66 books of history, stories, letters, and poetry that fit together to form God's one big story. The epic adventure of how He created us and loves us so much that He made a way to rescue us. As we travel through the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, we discover people who met God and found their lives changed forever. Now, for an amazing story, inspired by the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verses 9 through 12.
The writer of Ecclesiastes tells us 2 people are better than 1. They can help each other in everything they do. Suppose either of them falls down, then the one can help the other one up. But suppose a person falls down and doesn't have anyone to help them up. Then feel sorry for that person. One person could be overpowered, but 2 people can stand up for themselves. And a rope made with 3 cords isn't easily broken. Let's see how this might play out in someone's life today. Jackson slid into the small school theater and took a seat in the back row and waited for Mr. Ray, the music and arts teacher. It looked like there was only one other kid who showed up to build the set for the 5th grade production of Charlotte's Web. Amal from Mrs. Wiseman's class. Hey.
Hi.
The 2 boys sat there in awkward silence until Mr. Ray showed up.
Ah, my set team. Fantastic. You guys know each other?
Kinda.
Different classes. Well, you're gonna get to spend a lot of time together in the next 2 weeks as we build this set and get it painted. You guys got any experience with power tools?
Jackson could see Amal shift nervously in his seat.
No, I don't want to go on stage. Miss Wiseman said I could do this instead.
Don't worry, I'll teach you what you need to know. How about you, Jackson?
I'm pretty good with a hammer, and I didn't want to wear some silly animal costume.
The 2 boys basically ignored each other as Mr. Ray showed them how to measure each piece of lumber for him to cut, and then he helped them lay out the pieces in a large frame.
Now, this'll be one of the wall flats for the backdrop. We'll paint it as part of the barn. Amal, you want to hammer in these nails?
I guess.
I'll hold it more like this. Don't worry, you'll get it.
I'll do this side.
Jackson nailed together the entire flat while Amal still struggled with one corner.
What a klutz.
But it was a different story the next day when they started to paint.
This flat is part of our barn wall. I want you guys to paint a couple of chickens right there.
Amal grabbed a brush right away.
Oh, do you want them to look like real chickens or like cartoons?
Just give them your own personal spin.
Amal got to work right away, creating an entire palette of colors while Jackson was still trying to figure out which brush to pick.
Now, I've got to run down to the art room. Amal, why don't you show Jackson how to get started?
I don't really...
Mr. Ray smiled at them both.
He needs a hand. I think you guys will make a great team.
Mr. Ray hurried out. Jackson and Amal avoided each other's eyes.
Well, I'll sketch an outline for the chickens.
What do I do?
Just, fill it in.
I'm not really an artist.
Jackson dipped his brush randomly in the blue paint and frowned at Amal's outline.
Just have fun with it.
Jackson swiped the blue brush, outlining a wing.
I've never seen a blue chicken.
Oh,
It's great. It'll stand out.
Oh, thanks.
By the time Mr. Ray returned, Jackson was surprised to discover that he and Amal had already painted 5 brilliant hued chickens. Mr. Ray grinned.
I've never seen a more flamboyant flock.
Jackson held out his fist to Amal, and Amal, surprised, gave him a fist bump.
Yep, see you boys tomorrow.
The next day, Amal showed up with a bruised finger on his left hand.
I can still paint with my right.
What happened?
Mr. Kunkel keeps putting me in as goalie during PE, and then I mess it up, and everyone on the team gets mad at me.
Do you stay on your toes? Keep your eye on the ball?
No. I just panic when the ball comes at me.
Look, I can show you some tips later in the parking lot, before my mom comes.
Really? That would be great.
And you know, Jackson turned out to be a pretty good teacher because Amal managed to get 2 blocks during PE the next day. And when Jackson showed up to paint sets, stressed out by a math test, Amal grabbed his textbook.
Fractions?
I see all these weird numbers and I freeze up.
You just have to break it down like this.
With Amal's help, Jackson managed to stay calm during his test the next day. And by the middle of the next week, they had completed the entire backdrop for Charlotte's Web.
Well done. I knew you two would make a great team.
Amal's pretty okay.
Jackson's not too terrible.
Look, I know you guys are really different from each other, but it's boring if all your friends are just like you.
Together, they started gathering wood scraps and wiping off brushes.
Seriously, one of the wisest men to ever live pointed this out. Solomon.
Solomon?
Yep. He's this king in the Bible. He was a builder and an artist and super rich too. But for all the things he had, you know what he valued most? Friendship. He says it like this: 2 people are better than 1. They can help each other in everything they do.
On point.
Yeah.
Amal held out his fist, and Jackson tapped it with his own. Maybe Solomon and Mr. Ray were onto something.